Hi there. Welcome to The Preventable, the podcast giving you a seat at the table with conversations about the intersection of alcohol, drugs, and mental health in everyday lives. Take a seat and join us.
Welcome to The Preventable. That's the name we've decided on. We're sticking with it.
Okay.
Joining me today is Mr. Clark Porter. Say hi to the audience, Clark.
Hello.
So Clark is, we'll go into it in a minute about how I met you, Clark, but your current title, I remember, I can't forget it. You're a community resource specialist and you're with the Federal Probation Office,
Yes.
Eastern Region.
Yes.
Yes.
Going on 13 years.
13 years.
Yeah,
Wow.
getting old.
Yeah, don't even start. I turned 40 this year, and it's like, is it?
I'm 52.
You look fab. It's the purple. If you can't see it, but he's wearing a fabulous purple shirt. So here's how we met. One of our educators who goes into the classrooms got a message from you on Facebook.
Yes, Deborah Townsend.
Miss Deborah Townsend, because you were in her class, I believe, when you were in like third grade, fifth grade, something like that.
Third or fourth. I think she was third and fourth she taught.
And so you reached out to her and said, hey, remember me, right?
Yeah.
And she remembered you. Why do you think she remembered you?
Well, I was a screw-up one. and
You were a screw-up? Is that what you said? Oh, okay.
She taught at a group home for kids who were in the system, foster system. And so that's where she met me at, in the foster system. I was in the foster system. And kind of like, you don't get to hear, whatever happened to someone. So I kind of gave her the quick and fast, hey, after I left you guys, ended up in prison for armed robbery when I was 17. And then I got out, went to Forest Park Community College, got my associates in human services. Then Dean Wiltenberg said, hey, come to WashU. So I ended up at WashU. And then I got my master's of social work from University of Missouri, St. Louis. So I told her, I said, hey, this is what I'm doing now. So she's like, oh, my God. So, yeah.
Yeah, oh, my God is right. She started crying. She walked in with the phone and said, I can't believe this. Look at this. And then she said that she always remembered you, not because you were a screw-up, but because you had that smile, that same smile that you have right now. And, like, you stirred the pot a little bit, but that you had kind of a heart of gold. So, Clark, how'd you get into trouble? No naming names, of course, but
pretty much no direction, because after I left the system, which what happens to everybody, you kind of either age out of the system or walk away from the system. I walked away from the system at 15, ended up on the streets. So it was like feast or famine, so. And, either you became predator or you became prey. I chose to be predator. And kind of fell in, with my brother and other guys as far as being in the streets, and ended up committed armed robbery when I was 17 at the federal level. Robbed a downtown post office, broad daylight, so it wasn't all that bright.
That was bold.
And dumb. I wouldn't say bold, I say dumb.
Okay.
And I ended up with a 35-year sentence. And during that time of my incarceration, still hadn't grown up yet mentally, so I was steady getting into trouble. Ended up in what they call Supermax for 10 of the 15 years. I spent 10 of my last 10 years in Supermax.
And what is Supermax?
That's 22 hours a day lockdown, 7 days a week. Yeah, so that's pretty much how I lived the last 10 years of my incarceration. And then I came out, and I'm like, hey, I ain't gonna make it out here. And I realized my shortcomings. One, I had mental health issues, bipolar, generalized anxiety disorder, depression, the whole 9 yards, I guess you could say. So I immediately went to therapy over at UMSL. They got a service called Community Psychological Services.
Yes.
And I would pay my little $10 at the time.
Yep.
And I would get treatment. And then she's like, hey, you seem like you got some things going on besides just adjustment, So she sent me over to St. Louis University. It's called SLU Care, Psychiatric Services. And they like, hey, they diagnosed me as a generalized anxiety, but they missed a lot. It wasn't, and then fast forward like 10 years later, because you don't just get your diagnosis and walk away.
Correct.
They don't get it right the first time. And then one of the young ladies at SLU Curry, she started hearing me say some things. She said, take this little blue pill. I'm like, I'm not bipolar. And she said, well, just take it anyway. And then it was like the magic pill, everything just worked out. And that kind of got me on track with a lot of things and kept me moving forward for progression through life. And everything's been good.
Well, and you kind of gloss over that, but it's hard work.
Yeah, you had to put in the work.
Yeah, you have to put in the work.
A lot of people don't want to put in the work because you have to kind of humble yourself to a lot of things and admit to a lot of things you don't want to admit to. So.
And we're going to come back to kind of how you're taking the lessons you learned to help other men that are in your same position or are in the position you were in. Yeah. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But you sort of like fast forwarded through your story. And so you said that you were in Supermax for 10 years, and then you got out and you went to school. Like you went to UMSL, and you made the decision that you didn't want to be back there, right? So I'm wondering, like, when you were released, how were your social supports at that time?
I had a strong social support system with my family, but they weren't in there. And my aunt, she always said, we'll help you, but we're not going to do it for you.
Okay.
And so when I got out, I realized, hey, and it wasn't personal. It was just that you have to take responsibility. And so I immediately got my own apartment, got employed, took those steps. And then I had to learn how to manage, on many levels, financially, socially, and it was a learning curve because a lot of people had to teach me. I didn't have social skills, I was like a caveman when it come to dating, hey, let's go out. I was like, hold up, and then I had a professor at Forest Park, Cecilia Johnson, and she would tell me, hey, this is how you conduct yourself, this is how you act. And then I had another student advisor, Eloise Finney. She would tell me, they would work on my social skills. Between those two, when my aunt, they worked on my social skills. And that's what I had to learn through them. And I kind of fell through the cracks at WashU because WashU, mental health is a regular thing there. And so everybody looks normal, even though nobody's normal there.
Yeah, and what is normal? What does that even mean?
Right. Yeah. So when I went to UMSL, Dr. Sharon Johnson, she picked up where Dr. Cecilia Johnson and Miss Finney left off, and her and Patty Rosenthal, they was like, hey, we have to have a powwow because it's not going to work. So they had to teach me.
They had to teach you. So the last episode of this podcast, we had a 3rd and a 5th grader in here, and we were talking about social skills, which they don't call them that, right? I mean, they call them like friendship. Like we learned about friendship, and we learned about sharing and being nice, and treating others with respect. And I asked them why it's important. And they said, well, because sometimes, it's hard when you're a grown-up. Or if we learn these things now, then it might be easier.
Right.
And I think it's interesting that, you remembered the teacher, Miss Deborah, that you had when you were in elementary school. You're talking now about all of these social skills you had to relearn. How old were you when you got out?
32.
32. So you're learning these things at 32. I bet they would have been a heck of a lot easier had you learned them when you were
a kid.
Exactly, like 2nd grade, right?
Right. And it's not so much that I didn't learn those
Correct.
things. I learned them, but I had to relearn them.
You had to relearn them. Yep.
Because my way of doing it, respect is a big thing in prison. So it's like out here, a person bumps you, you have to walk away. Where in prison, that's like you don't do that. Communication skills. People, when I first came out, the most weirdest thing to me was my uncle and my aunt, and they said, hey, how you doing? They met me at the halfway house. We laughed, we joked, talked, got caught up. And they started having a conversation about shopping at, which was then Famous Bar, and all the sales at Famous Bar. And I'm like, why are they having a conversation about Famous Bar? What the heck is that about? It's kind of weird, but that's normal communication.
Right.
That's something I had to learn.
Just like chit chat.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to chit chat.
Right.
That's something you don't do in prison.
Yeah.
You always got your guard up.
Yeah.
The conversation is about, who killed who shot who stabbed who, those kinds of conversations. You don't have a chit chat. So it's like we just didn't. So it's not normal to me.
So that's become, I mean, you're a man of many missions, I think, but one of your missions, at least how I know you, is to really help men in particular who are leaving the system and re-entering society, kind of reunify with their families, right, and their kids, but then also like kind of gain some of those skills that you had to relearn.
Right. I spent a lot of time at Marion, USP Marion, and FCI Greenville prisons.
Those are prisons. Yes, I've been there. I was at Marion with you. Yes.
Yeah, and so I spent a lot of time teaching them cognitive behavioral therapy. You know, teach them self-control, responsible thinking, how to develop goals as it relates to them getting themselves on track. So it's a constant learning process, because what seems easy to you and I, it's not easy to them. Because you're talking about a person who spends from the age of 12 to the age of 20 in the streets, then the age of 20 to the age of 30 in the prison system. They don't know how to function out in society.
I mean, your brain is developing during that time, and you know what you do a lot of, you get good at.
Right, and then you have to understand the trauma involved as well.
I can't even.
They're stunted by that. You know, they're stunted by neglect and abuse. And then you put them in an environment that's more violence and neglect and abuse in many ways.
Right.
And then you spit them back out into the community.
And then you're expecting them to hold down a job, succeed, be welcomed with open arms by their families, knowing how to parent, knowing how to be a partner in a relationship.
And they don't.
Because,
you get up in the morning, you go to work, you have a relationship, normal life. That's not normal to them. So if I take them and put them in that environment, they can't function. It's the same as if I take you from corporate America, who was a CEO, and I take you and drop you all the way back down and say, okay, here's a kilo of drugs, sell it, and function in the streets. Can't do it.
No.
So how you think they're going to be able to manage in mainstream society when they never had to do so?
Right. And one of the things that we've talked about, I mean, we've sort of partnered together to teach or reteach parenting skills, communication skills, as you mentioned, but also kind of skills that would be needed to live a life free of substances. Like we sort of avoid the word like recovery or something like that, because not everybody thinks that they have a quote unquote problem with drugs, and not everybody was put into drugs, put into jail because of drugs, but it's definitely part of the lifestyle. Right. But so you said something really interesting to me. You're like, okay, so somebody gets out of jail, and what do they do for fun? They can't do the same things for fun that they used to do before jail, right? You had to learn, for example, what it meant to go to the art museum.
Right. I had to learn how, to go to Art Hill and just be bored.
Right. Exactly.
I had to learn how to sit with a cup of coffee and do nothing. Because all around me there was activities, there was constant hustle and bustle. So I had to relearn all of these things. And it was a process just to be able to sit and not to be in a constant state of survival mode.
So what do you think is the relationship with people kind of re-entering and maintaining what some might call a sober lifestyle? Or, I mean, because there's traps everywhere, right? I mean, I'm assuming you get tested pretty regularly for drugs, like you have to be on probation or parole. I mean, but that's difficult for...
Yeah, pro-social lifestyle.
Exactly.
It's not easy.
No.
Because, my social club was the pool hall and the liquor store, corner liquor store. My acquaintances were guys who were addicts, thieves, and hustlers. So now you take all that away. Who do I have? This is what I know. This is all I know. And you telling me to, hey, sit down at a coffee shop and have a cup of coffee. It's not easy.
So without giving the secret sauce away, how do you do it? How do we...
It's a learning process.
Yeah, how do we start to rebuild?
It's a constant learning process. You take a step at a time. You have to kind of step out there and you learn how to, let's say, go to the art museum. You do what you did in prison. You develop a program in prison, that program consisted of, faith in terms of religion you develop. You got employed in the prison, do that in the community, faith in the community. You had a recreational and health. You did things to develop yourself intellectually. Do the same thing in the community. Only you did it on the micro level, you imagine you do it on the macro level.
So you and the folks that you work with, I mean, you're providing pretty intensive support for these gentlemen. Right. What do you think, I mean, this is probably like the $1 million question, but what do you think is the biggest misconception about formerly incarcerated people who are re-entering society? Like, what do you think is...
That they don't have to be offenders, that they can just stop, and it doesn't work like that. It's a whole dynamic involved with stopping, desisting. You know, people think, oh, you just come out here and get a job and live like everybody else. It doesn't work like that, because that's like me telling you, hey, come out here and sell a kilo of drugs. You know, you can't do it. You don't know.
Yeah, I'd be terrible at that, by the way.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'd be terrible at it.
So what makes you think they're going to succeed at being in mainstream society and functioning when they got to get by on $15 an hour?
So it's more than just giving them, quote unquote, a job or a house. It's a whole way of thinking.
It's a whole thinking. You have to change their whole thinking.
So how do we do it? One by one? Are there...
I'm a big believer in cognitive-based therapies.
Tell our readers, or our listeners, readers, tell them what that means.
Changing their thinking process.
Okay.
Yeah, tell them to go left instead of right, which is something they always done. You got to change their whole thinking and get them to see things in a whole different perspective. You got to show them how to see things in a whole different perspective. You got to guide them through the process, because just saying change, which I hate the expression change people, places, and things, because you can tell me that, but how do I do it? So
right. No, that's true. And so changing people's places and things, that's a common saying and concept in different fellowship groups and things like that.
Sounds pretty.
It does sound pretty, but you're saying
the application is way harder.
So it's that, how do we teach those skills? How do we do that? I mean, that's...
For someone who's been incarcerated, you gotta apply it to prison.
Yeah. Oh,
so
okay.
They understand that. So when you say change people, places, and things, what did you do when you went to prison? You didn't hang out with the guys, the sexual predators. You didn't hang out with the drug addicts. You didn't hang out with the gamblers. You avoided the 3 rules. You know, you avoid gambling, sex. You avoid drugs. Those 3 things, you'll be okay. And disrespect, you avoid those things, you stay out of trouble. So how do you avoid those things? You get a whole new program for yourself, which involves you going to, let's say, to the mosque. It involves you getting the book and learning about Machiavelli. It involves you.
I love me some Machiavelli. Yeah. Okay. All right.
So
political theory nerd is coming out in me. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
You know, it involves you finding a job as an orderly. Anything to keep you out of the way and keep you in a structured environment, in a structured situation. So when they get out, you got to teach them how to be in a structured situation, but you're telling them to create that structure for themselves and stay in that groove.
I mean, I know how to do it with little kids. And so
Same thing with adults.
It is. It's the step by step, and it's peer support, right? It's positive outlets. It's that stuff. What is your take on this word, like grit or resilience? It's a word that we use a lot. The literature says is a word that you can use, but I know recently it's kind of really fallen out of favor.
I'm a strong believer in it.
You are?
Because,
okay.
Because if we got what they call a pre-sentence report, it's kind of like a snapshot of a person's life.
What is it called?
It's pre-sentence report.
Okay, pre-sentence report. Okay.
You know, the probation officer in the pre-sentence unit will write up a report, and it goes by your criminal offenses, your family background, whether or not you're a substance abuser, whether or not you have any health issues, whether or not you've been employed, what's your level of education. All of that is a snapshot, and it goes before the judge for him to consider mitigating circumstances. Everybody always pre-sentence reads the same: loss, violence, abuse, neglect, trauma. Always. Out of 10 reports, you would only get a normal one. Out of 10 reports, you may get one normal one. That's lucky.
And that basically is just less trauma, probably.
Less trauma.
Yeah,
trauma
right.
has been reported.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you start talking about resiliency, guys, they found their way to overcome. It may not be your way.
Right.
His way may have been, well, things aren't going well for me. I'm going to sell drugs. Things, instead of being preyed upon, I'm going to be the predator.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. It's always there. It's just, it may not be the picture you want to see or what you envision, but it's there. A person look at my life and say, man, he was a violent person when he was in prison. But I'm standing.
You made it out.
I made it out
on this side to help countless other individuals,
but
right?
A person would look at my background and be like, oh my God, because there was hesitancy would let me back into the prison system. Once they read my prison record, things like that. But on the other side of that, I took a long way and a long route, which is a lot of these guys do, but in the end, they're still standing. Because I've got guys who've been shot up multiple times, went through physical abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse, and they still standing. So what's your ideal of resiliency? Is it, it's just like substance abuse. Is a guy clean? If he goes 90 days, do you call that a success or do you call it a failure, even though he relapsed? Is how you measure it.
You're just the best person to have on. I could talk to you all day. So what is success for you, Clark?
For me personally?
Yeah, for you. What does success look like?
Walking down 20 years on this job and just walking away. Nothing, no fanfare, no nothing to where someone say, hey.
Good luck with that, by the way. There's going to be some fanfare when you walk away.
Just he did 20 years, he walked away. That was it. Nothing spectacular. Just and me being an ex-convict is just an asterisk. That's it. I try to live like that. That's just an asterisk to who I am. It's just not the sum total of who I am.
Do you think it's moving in that direction? Like, do you feel like it's less of a thing and more of an asterisk, that it's not a part of you?
Yeah, it's not a part of me. I make it a part of me when I'm working with guys because they have to see the
lived experience. They need to know that what you're talking about.
With my family, with my kids, they can care less. They still don't listen to me.
It's rear view mirror stuff.
They don't listen to me. They don't. It doesn't excite them. A family dinner. It's not brought up. A family Christmas or family functions.
And is that success to you?
Yeah.
That it's literally, it's a footnote.
Yeah, and I'm not in a state of survival. I'm not in a state of rebuilding my life. I'm just, average guy trying to pay rent. I'm trying to pay a mortgage, trying to pay a car note, and living life.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking some time today and including us in part of your life. A few years ago when Deborah brought the phone to me and said, "You're never going to believe this," with tears in her eyes, she was just so excited, number one, first and foremost, to just hear from a former student who remembered her. I mean, that's what every teacher wants. And love that, you are making an impression in the men that you're working with right now. If you like more of these conversations, if you're interested in hearing more about Clark and others, please consider reviewing or subscribing to the Preventable podcast. Clark, it has been a real pleasure. It's been too long, my friend. Way too long. We need to go to Marion soon. All right. Talk about... Yeah, okay. Yes, you better. All right. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for joining us at The Preventable, brought to you ad-free by Prevent+Ed. Prevent+Ed works to reduce or prevent the harms of alcohol and other drug use through education, intervention, and advocacy. Please visit their website at prevented.org. Like what you heard? Rate, review, and subscribe to stay up to date with what we are serving on The Preventable.